Hi everybody, welcome back to another video. This is Blink, and today we're going to be going over my top 10 games of 2019. A little bit late, I know, a few weeks into January, but it took me a little while to capture all the footage and put the list together, and I wanted to make sure that I could be as accurate as possible. For being honest, I did not have a chance to play everything I wanted to in 2019. I mean, it's hard to ever play everything you want to play that comes out in a given year, but I feel like I played most of the big stuff, and I'm pretty happy with both my list and the year overall for games. I think 2019 has a bit of a reputation for being a slower year. We're going into a new console generation coming up here in 2020, and so fewer big AAA releases and things. But for indie games or for new IPs, I think that 2019 was one of the best years we've had probably in the last 5 years. I had a ton of fun with games this year, so I've put together my top 10. I hope you enjoy them. Please share with me what your either top 10 games were. If you have a video, feel free to link me to it. I'd love to watch. Otherwise, down in the comments, feel free to throw what your favorite games from last year were. Harass me for the ones that didn't make it onto my list, whatever it might be. So, without further ado, let's just throw it into game number 10.
So this might not be quite so popular of an opinion, but when Apple Arcade was first announced, I actually got pretty excited. There have probably been one or two mobile games a year that have really excited me or caught my attention, but I don't play as many as I'd like, and so it feels like a bit of unexplored territory. So when a whole slew of single-player focused games with almost no monetization was announced, I was excited to check them out. Of all the games that I checked out on Apple Arcade, What the Golf definitely stood out to me. Anyone that hasn't played What the Golf before, it's essentially golf meets WarioWare. If you think of the short, quick, snappy levels of WarioWare, it's the same concept here. They'll set you up with a golf scene, and then you need to take your shot, which usually ends up surprising you or doing something weird or unexpected. The thing that surprised me most about the game, honestly, was how many different ways they could take that concept and do something new with it. It was a 7 or 8 hour game to get 100% of the medals, and the entire time I was constantly being surprised and laughing and wanting to share the different levels with people. If you want to have a good chuckle or some silly fun, there aren't many better games than What the Golf out there. Some games are just great about giving you a lot of options, but a lot fewer games are good at making those options all feel equal and viable. Thankfully, this is an area where The Outer Worlds really excels. The Outer Worlds was a welcome surprise for me. I'll be the first to admit that I haven't put a ton of time into the Fallout games or the Elder Scrolls games, outside of playing a lot of Skyrim VR. When I heard that a game from previous Fallout developers was being created in a more contained and focused world, that was really exciting for me. Thankfully, the environments they've built, the people they populated their worlds with, and the overall structure of the game are all great. I loved the bright, vivid planets. I loved crawling through the packed environments and uncovering hidden secrets. And most of all, I loved that once I did discover a new secret or an exciting new place or exciting thing that I wanted to do, the game would give me a ton of options for how to approach it. I played almost entirely a non-violent character, talking or hacking my way out of most situations, and I always felt like I had choices. I never felt like I had to fight. Sometimes fighting felt like the easiest option, but I always felt like I could exercise some of my other skills to get out of a situation. The writing and the voice acting do a good job of bringing the characters to life as well. Some of the characters in this game, Parvati in particular, were my favorite across any game this year. As you're exploring the worlds and interacting with these characters, you're inevitably going to have to make choices, and some of the tough decisions really stuck with me. These aren't always just binary black and white good versus evil choices. A lot of times you're choosing between groups that have fundamentally different ideologies. They just view the world differently, and you have to decide for yourself what the right path is. You have to determine what's right or what's just. And in some cases, you have to decide if your actions are even advancing you towards that goal. A lot of times, I would make a decision, and I wouldn't feel good about it, but I knew I would feel worse about the option I didn't take. For anyone looking to scratch that open-world role-playing itch, or for anyone that appreciates good choices in games, good characters and writing, or just really bright, colorful, lush environments, then you'll find something to enjoy with the Outer Worlds. I'm a huge fan of the original Luigi's Mansion. Exploring its mansion, unlocking abilities, and opening new paths is one of my favorite memories of the early GameCube. So when Dark Moon launched on the 3DS, I was disappointed that it didn't hook me in the same way. I mean, I liked the game, but I felt like it was missing something. It didn't quite scratch the same itch. Thankfully, now we have Luigi's Mansion 3, and some of that original spark is back. When I first started Luigi's Mansion 3, I was really just excited to be back in one central location again. And while that's true, the whole game does take place within the single hotel, Luigi's Mansion is actually the most level-based and broken up in structure that the series has ever seen. Each floor of the hotel operates like its own self-contained stage. Thankfully, that turned out to be a winning formula, and the environments are so interesting to explore that you hardly notice that this is no longer the one huge mansion that you're exploring. Every corner of the world is absolutely jam-packed with secrets, money, and treasure to collect. I loved opening a new room, whipping my vacuum around, and seeing what I could find. The game looks great, and even when there's a ton of physics and particles flying all over the screen, it never slowed down. It really impressed me, honestly, with how much could be happening at one time in this game. Luigi still has all the charm he always had, and Gooigi's an excellent addition to his toolkit, even if he doesn't have a ton of personality, and does a good job of adding new gameplay elements without slowing down the gameplay at all. It still has that, uber level of Nintendo polish, and it stays interesting all the way through. I was always looking forward to the elevator door opening up and seeing what the new theme would be for the next level. Honestly, this is one of the best games Nintendo has developed in a long time, and it really has me excited for where the series can continue to go into the future. Just feels good to have Luigi's Mansion back. When I first saw Tetris 99 get revealed, I couldn't help but laugh. Here's Nintendo launching their own battle royale, finally hopping into the genre, and they're doing it with Tetris of all things. It's so stereotypically Nintendo. This is the type of game you'd expect to see in the April Fool's edition of a Game Fan magazine, not an actual releasing title. I'm not amazing at Tetris by any stretch, but I do love it. 2018's Tetris Effect was one of my favorite games that year, and now Tetris 99's here to keep the streak going for the second year running. Tetris 99 is simple to pick up, but there's a surprising amount of depth beyond the actual Tetris gameplay. Learning the ins and outs of the Battle Royale system was fun. I got a kick out of learning the best ways to manipulate other players to my advantage, and turn the tables on someone who thinks they're going to knock me out, only to hit them with a few well-placed Tetrises and knock them out. After playing for a while, I enjoyed learning to switch between aggressive and defensive strategies, waiting for just the right moment to knock out the other player. Plus, when it got down to just me and one other player, our pieces flying back and forth, tossing junk at each other as we both fight for our first victory, our first place finish, my heart was in my throat. No other game this year comes close to that adrenaline rush. Probably more than any other game, I just keep returning to Tetris 99. Anytime I have a little bit of time, it's easy to pick up and play, and it's always just as fun as the last time I played it. It's been a real treat, and I'm so glad that a game as weird as this exists. I'm a somewhat recent convert to the Yakuza series. I first played the Kiwami games when they released on PlayStation 4, and so when a new standalone entry from that same studio was coming out, I got really excited. Judgment trades away some of the Yakuza themes and instead puts you on the other side of the coin playing as a detective. You'll investigate a series of murders, a local turf war, and corruption in all levels of the public and private sector. The story is compelling and detailed, it has plenty of twists and turns to keep you guessing, and honestly is just thrilling to follow along with. This is some of the best storytelling that the studio's done, and one of the best crime stories I've probably read in a long time. Thankfully, that level of quality also carries into the side missions. I can't overemphasize the delight I felt while doing the side missions in Judgment. From stopping a serial nude flasher to befriending a ninja cosplayer, there's a lot of gold to mine from the different side encounters. You're constantly running into new people and into silly situations, and the game's writing is witty and modern to match that pace. It's not afraid to every now and again look you directly in the eye, stare at the camera, and give you a little wink, just to let you know that it's having fun with you. The combat is fun. It's pretty similar to previous Yakuza series games, if you've played any of those. And if you haven't, it's pretty standard 3D brawler fare. And there are some extra gameplay options in this that spice things up a bit. You'll be able to tail people or investigate crime scenes. And even though these are a little bit straightforward and on rails, they're still fun to do for a while. But for me, it was all about that main story and those side missions. If you're a fan of these Yakuza games, or the games by this studio, then you're almost certainly going to like Judgment. But what's nice is if you're new to these types of games, this is a perfect spot to jump in. I can't wait to get back into the city and meet some new people. So in Control, you play as Jesse Faden and you're investigating the Federal Bureau of Control in search of your brother. From the first few moments of this game, I could tell that it was going places, and boy does it. It really has a kind of X-Files meets Twin Peaks vibe. Everything is supernatural or paranormal, and there's a lot of sort of unsettling and unexpected things happening all the time. The setting of the game is really interesting. The Federal Bureau of Control, which is this sort of entity that researches these paranormal and supernatural activities, exists in what's called the Oldest House, which is sort of like a modern take on Hogwarts. It's a building that is structured like a government facility might be, but it's constantly changing and constantly moving around. So you can have unexpected and weird areas leading into one another, and you'll find all kinds of interesting information and discussions with characters and things like that around how they exist inside the Oldest House. And all those conversations with people, all those little collectibles and little bits you find scattered throughout the world are the best part of this game. I've never played a game that does such good world building. I mean, from the moment you step foot, you're instantly engrossed, you want to know what's going on, and it's always fun to find a new collectible and read through it. They do a really good job of being consistent with their world, being consistent with their themes, and finding new and interesting things to put in front of you. The characters you encounter are odd and goofy and likable. There's a million little details scattered all around the walls and the desks and the cube farms. It's just like a really well-realized and compelling setting. Everywhere you look, there's something cool to see, and it all makes sense in the context of the game. The game isn't afraid to get weird either. I mean, it is dealing in the supernatural and the paranormal, so that maybe isn't too big of a surprise, but it delights in coming up with a million paranormal things for you to uncover. It takes itself seriously, but I never felt like it took itself too seriously. There's always this kind of air about the game of like, yeah, this stuff is real, and this is a big deal, but there's like a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek to it that I really enjoyed. It's like, you could really sense the developers of this game having fun building the world. The combat in the game is interesting too. You have a decent amount of psychic powers that you'll unlock, you get different weapons, and then you can find or create mods for your character or your weapons that give them extra damage or bonus effects, and it works pretty well. There's a pretty sizable number of enemies for you to encounter, and as long as you're willing to experiment and try to be creative with the powers, you'll have fun. I found it was a little easy to fall into a rut of using the same thing, but I started having more fun when I branched out and used the different weapons and different powers. You can create some pretty cool looking battle scenes. The thing I liked most about Control was the sense of place. Reading and discovering new information was my favorite part, and learning how the world operates and what its rules are was a ton of fun. Do yourself a favor if you play the game, and poke around a little bit, because you're bound to find some interesting things. Baba Is You proves that all it takes is one really good idea to create a compelling game. Each level is a single screen puzzle with a few key phrases scattered throughout. These phrases spell out the rules of the world. For example, you might see Baba is you or wall is stop. The complexity comes in your ability to push these words around on the grid and break the rules to create new ones. So, Let's say you push the stop tile away from the phrase wall is stop. Suddenly, walls won't stop you. But why stop there? Why not push wall into the place of the word Baba, creating the phrase wall is you? Now you're controlling all the walls on the level. You manipulate the very rules of the game to create and achieve your own win condition. That sounds simple enough in the example I gave, but it rapidly becomes really complex. The complexity is what I love most about it. Sometimes I would stare at my TV or at my Switch, completely stumped for a half an hour, and suddenly the solution would hit me. Other times I would experiment and poke around, and hope to find a solution that never came. And so I'd have to stop and come back the next day with a fresh brain, and suddenly I was able to solve it. Sometimes the levels will change only a single tile or a single word, and in doing that will force a completely unique situation on you that demands a completely unique solution. Baba's You is one of the smartest puzzle games I've ever played, and it's a completely unique experience. It's impressive to me that they came up with a concept that has never been explored in another game, at least not one that I've ever played before, and then took that concept and ran so far with it. There are so many levels to unlock and play in this game, and they get really, really difficult. I don't think I'll ever finish every level here, but I am happy to keep trying. After the incredible Titanfall 2, I was always going to try whatever Respawn Entertainment put out next. I had such confidence in them as a developer that I didn't even bat an eye when they announced a free-to-play Battle Royale game, which is a genre I'd really never given any attention to. My trust was rewarded too, because Apex Legends is one of my favorite first-person shooters in a long time. There's a lot to love in Apex. Whenever I take a shot, I always feel like I'm the one responsible for the outcome, whether it hit or not. Weapon variety is well handled, with a large pool of guns to choose from and optional hop-ups to change some of the weapon's firing modes or playstyles. The game's well balanced. From the guns to the heroes, you can really experiment and find something that fits your style, and nothing feels like it's completely out of the question. The character abilities are well designed. They support your ability to either deal damage if you wish, escape if you wish, or manage the space between you and your enemies. Apex has made a couple of additions that I think the Battle Royale genre has or will really benefit from. The biggest is probably the contextual ping system, which does a good job enabling teamwork even if you're not using a headset. You're able to ping and highlight areas of importance, weapons or ammo, or let your team know what you need without needing to communicate over voice chat. Sure, using voice chat with a team of people you know is still preferred, but this system goes a long way to make playing with random players a lot more enjoyable. The maps that they've released have featured a lot of interesting locations, a lot of vantage points for you to scout out and discover, and a lot of interesting set pieces for you to see. They've done a good job now with both of them, and I'm looking forward to see what their next map looks like. When Apex first launched, it was a little bit slight. It only had the core elements in place that it needed and a bare roster of heroes, but Respawn has done a great job with adding new characters, adding modes, seasonal events, unlockables, and fleshing out a battle pass to make it worth your time. I really don't play a lot of first-person shooters, so it's a great feeling when one really clicks for me. The last one I probably really got into was Modern Warfare 2 back on the 360, so it's been almost a decade since a shooter really gripped me. It's not too much of a surprise considering it's Respawn, but I'm happy that Apex clicked, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. From the start of the game to the credits, I was entranced by Sayonara Wild Hearts. It offers up something so much larger than the sum of its parts. The game is easy enough to explain mechanically, but that really undersells what the experience is like when all cylinders are firing at the same time. The concept of Sayonara Wild Hearts is a great elevator pitch. You play through a pop concept album. Everything you do in the game lines up perfect to the catchy pop soundtrack. The actual gameplay, if I was going to pick a genre to describe it, is probably something akin to a rhythm runner. You're constantly moving forward, you're usually dodging around the screen or pressing timed button prompts to the music, and everything lines up to the soundtrack perfectly. If you think of a game like Rez or Child of Eden, where music and gameplay are fused directly together, you'll probably have an idea of what Sayonara Wild Hearts is going for. And while those controls are simple, the creativity and variety is constantly keeping things interesting. This game is incredibly stylistic, bright, colorful neon pinks and purples everywhere, with a ton of little things to see. Sometimes you're in a motorcycle race. Other times you're in a sword fight. Other times you're battling mecha wolves. Every time I started up a new level, I couldn't wait to see what the game was going to throw at me, how it was going to shift its perspective, what new gameplay modes it was going to introduce, and what creative choices it would take to line up that gameplay with the tone or theme of the song that was playing. This game really has everything that I never knew I wanted. Narration by Queen Latifah? Check. Overt references to magical girl anime? Check. And all of that is wrapped up in a touching story that thematically is about handling heartbreak and breakups, but it's vague enough to let you do some of your own interpretation. It's like a great album that way. Everything you see and everything you do fits to the theme and to the tone, but it really is vague enough for you to apply your own life experience, making it personal. You'll be able to take what you saw and what you experienced in the game and map it to your own life to connect with it in a new level. There was something just cathartic about the time I spent with Sayonara Wild Hearts. Anytime I felt stressed out or I needed a pick-me-up, the game was always there to lift my spirits and keep me going. Honestly, it gives me the same feeling as re-listening to an album from a favorite artist, which makes sense considering what the game is. You love the music that you listen to in that album, but the mood it puts you in and the time and place it brings you back into is what's really most important. For a game that wants to be a playable album, it's crazy to me that they actually bottled that feeling and were able to reproduce it. It pulls from the best of both forms of media and creates something all on its own. Plus, it just happens to be my favorite soundtrack of the year and my favorite album of the year. So this one is an absolute must-play. The game isn't super long, but if you dedicate an hour and a half or so to sit down and play through it start to back, then you're almost guaranteed to have a good time. There's a particular type of game that we don't often see, and I desperately wish we would get more of. Games that teach you, or more importantly, let you teach yourself, and then test you on your knowledge of its world. Everything you do in Outer Wilds is entirely based on what you know rather than what you have. There aren't upgrades, skill trees, or levels to obtain. You set out into the solar system, and you begin to unpeel the mysteries of the game, learning as you go. Every new discovery I found, large or small, was part of unlocking a puzzle or secret that gave me context for the universe I was in. That sense of discovery and improvement, coupled with extremely creative world design, added up to one of the most rich and well-realized worlds I've ever seen. There's more to the game than just solving its mysteries, too. As you navigate your ship across the various planets and other interstellar curiosities, you'll learn more about the people that once inhabited those places. How did they work together? What were they triumphant in? What were their failures? What did they learn from their failures? These are the types of unexpected character building that Outer Wilds does, where other games don't. It was tremendously rewarding to get a sense of what had happened in a place I visited, what the characters thought about the events that took place, and understand more about their lives through the lens of those events. Even though things have clearly gone wrong, and even though this universe is a little haywire right now, you get a sense that it's okay. There are so many interesting places to see and discover in the Outer Wilds. Every planet you go to, every new discovery, felt like something I'd never seen in a game before. As you're exploring, too, the entire game is punctuated by one of the most effective soundtracks I've listened to in a long time. It doesn't quite edge out Sayonara Wild Hearts as my favorite, but it would definitely win in best use of soundtrack. As tensions rise or as you make new discoveries, the soundtrack kicks in and reapplies themes you've already heard in new ways to build a particular emotion. It's really good about meeting you right where you are at the sense of discovery and playing something that fits perfectly. The clockwork world of Outer Wilds is fascinating to explore, but as you start to discover new things and meet new people, you get a sense of this permeating, almost melancholic optimism in the air. This game has a theme that it punctuates down to its final moments. I had no expectations going into Outer Wilds. Outside of a few scattered bits of information, I didn't even really know what the game was about. I'm grateful for that too, because the less you know, the more rewards there are to find. It gave me one of the most surprising and rewarding gaming experiences I've felt in a long time.